welcome back to episode 30 of the Eclectic Collection podcast. Today we are calling it Car Companions, and aptly so. There's certain things in life that you get, like checks, pets, and cars, I believe is part of this list. They're just things that you have fun with ordering them or buying them, and life is a series of them. Pretty much people drive, so you have to have a different kind of car. If you're a pet person, you're most likely always going to have a pet. And although checks are kind of going by the wayside, it was always cool to get some new check or style of check when you ordered them. It's the little pleasures in life. So for me, not only having them and changing them up or getting the same one every time or whatever it is that was your thing, it was about naming them too, because personality was created by names. It was like giving an identity to these things. And I have had quite a few vehicles in my lifetime. I just really felt connected to all of them because you're in your car a lot. I am in my car more than the average person. And when it comes to leasing, I got out of that quickly because it was a really bad idea for me. I definitely drive more miles than the average person. And I just get connected to my car. I'm in my car all the time. My car is not just a vehicle of commuting to work, but going to different gigs and obviously vacationing and going back and forth for social reasons. But I'm just always in my car. My car is like an office. My car is like a baby house sometimes. And despite me always having an SUV that seats 7 or 8 people, I always feel like it's the only single seating SUV in the world. So each of my cars had a personality, has a name, and has backstory. And I thought, how fun was that? That people don't always do that, but they really should. So if you're in your car a lot, especially, you really owe it to your car to give them a name and give them a personality, because I've just always had that. And all my friends did it too. I started with Herbie. Herbie was a white 1985 Ford LTD Crown Victoria. And I loved Herbie. He was like a boat. He was a gigantic car. It was a big luxury car. My dad had a business, and he used to get a fleet of them for all his brothers were in business with him. So they each basically got that as like their family car. So he would go buy fleets of them for the families, and then go buy fleets of trucks for all the workers. And it was probably 90 when I got my license. So it was already older, and generally he changed the cars out every 4 years or so. So I got that one to be my first car, which was already used by the fam. And it was in great condition, but it held a lot of people, and so many stories could be told in that car. Unfortunately, Herbie was met with a very untimely demise, and he gave his life for me after senior prom. I was driving home the day after senior prom because I stayed at my buddy's house, and it was a big after party, and everybody was fine. I was totally responsible. I'd like to point that out. Not many people are, but yes, I can brag about that. And I was going home early in the morning, like 7 or 8 the next day, and it was really early, and there was nobody on the road, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, this very high-speed little red vehicle is coming at my friend and I don't know if the other driver was falling asleep, not paying attention, looking at something, speeding. I don't know. It was certainly not the era of looking at a phone, but was about to crash into me head on. So I had to veer off, and I just veered to the right quickly. And I was a pretty new young driver, and there was a small ravine, like point of the lawn that proceeded to go into like a V shape into the intersection that was just deep enough to throw the car out of whack and not be on level ground, which forced me into like a little shrub and base of a tree. It wasn't a big tree, it was a little sapling, but it was enough to murder Herbie. I was very sad. So he gave his life for me. The kick was Dad had just put tons of money into it for like new timing belt, new tires, and of course a big tune-up. So yeah, that went out the window. But I'm alive, and I have to say Dad always had a really good perspective on that. You can always replace metal, not people. So I loved Herbie. So at the end of the year, he had a friend that was a mechanic, luckily, and he came up with this 84 Oldsmobile Cutlass Sierra that was gray, beat up, very used, and I named him Maurice. And he was every bit of a Maurice that there could be. That car would literally go into reverse when you put it in park. It would park and drive, and he would actually drive in neutral, which could cause some problems, as you might imagine. So turning him off was just a scary thing. Often I found him kind of creeping forward. I mean, the engine would shut down, but he wouldn't necessarily stop moving. Needless to say, I used my emergency brake quite a bit, which I can't say that I used ever before or since as much. I got the name because of, if you saw Maurice, you'd understand, Steve Miller. I was thinking of Steve Miller and the Joker. Some people call me Maurice. Yeah, it was that. I'll just leave you with that image. Maurice was short-lived because he had a lot of trouble and eventually ended up incontinent. My first week in college, I was commuting and I was bringing him in, and the first week that I went to school, he was fine, had a little in the morning, but then Friday, I was coming home and I left school, and thank God my college was down the street, and pink fluid was all over the ground, and it was transmission fluid. I would come to learn that day, and I got home, and it was all over the driveway, and my dad and my brother said, don't stop it, don't turn it off, just drive it right to the dealership, which luckily my brother was working at the time, and he was like, we're getting a car. I'm like, thank God. So that was my big start college present, which led to the 1992 Mercury Topaz known as Whitey. I loved Whitey. He was a little compact car, and boy, did I put way too much stuff in Whitey. I gigged out of Whitey. He was a very small, definitely not meant for more than 4, legally 5, but I had anywhere from 8 to 12 people in that car at any given moment. The amount of equipment that I was able to force into Whitey was unbelievable. It was so bad that when I had my Technique 1200 coffin in the back of the car and I would load up all the crates of vinyl on top of it, sometimes it was so crowded and I needed to have people transported as well. I would take the Technique 1200 turntables out of the coffin, stack them on top of one another in the front seat, and stick the amp on top of that because they could take the weight. And it got so bad, and I did that so often, that my front, where the airbag was, plastic piece where a passenger would sit, actually had permanent dents in it. Pretty sure I destroyed the airbag, but, luckily I never needed it. And it was dented, like, really, really badly. And you could just see that there was something there all the time that wasn't supposed to be. But Whitey did many a field trip. Whitey did pretty much everything through college. And then Whitey befell a very sad end. It was 2/7/97. I'll never forget it. It was February 7th. I had just gotten out of college, graduated in 96. It was the following year. And I was taking a bunch of friends back to school to be there in time for a surprise party, which we were very late to. I was in Havertown, and I was stopped at a light. There was a person in front of me in another compact car. And you know those moments where you look in the rearview mirror and you just know something bad's about to happen, and all you can really do is brace for impact? That's kind of what happened. I had a full car of people and stuff, and I was really trashy, not going to lie, in Whitey. Not that I haven't been known to still throw some things around, but I was a disgrace in Whitey. There was trash, stuff, books, you name it. There was always just stuff everywhere in Whitey. It was awful. And disgracefully so. I saw in the rear view a very large truck. There was a woman driving a truck, not paying attention. She was looking in her rear view and trying to do something to her hair. I could see it. And I was stopped at a red light. I couldn't go anywhere. And not only did she pretty much accelerate to the tune of like 28 to 35 miles an hour, she smashes into the back of my car, thus pushing me into the car in front of me, and then bounces off of the back of my car and hits me again. So I get sandwiched. I'm the baloney. Her truck's fine. And in the second impact, all of a sudden, the radiator splits open and my car's smoking and it's a bad scene and he's totally disabled. So I feel like I don't always have to have the toe of shame, but it's probably never going to work again. But here's the best part. The insurance company decides that, no, we're going to fix it. Well, yeah, I call that a repack. When you have such troubles that your car starts smoking and blowing oil after it's been repaired, and the trans is beat, and the radiator is beat, and the gear shift's not even working inside the cabin. Poor Whitey was never, ever right again after that. He suffered serious terminal illnesses, one upon the other. The best part of that is that the man in front of me was not only illegally borrowing a car from someone else, wasn't from the country, didn't speak English, and had no insurance. And my Russian is very rusty, so I wasn't really able to communicate much to him. He ended up going to jail. So it was a really lose-lose-lose for everyone involved. The good news is it wasn't my fault, and the whole thing was paid for by the lady who hit everyone. But it was a pretty nasty, inconvenient thing, thus plummeting me into the car situation again. So at this time, I'm a young professional out of college and need a vehicle to go to my job. And eventually I made makeshift situations with different hand-me-down cars and different people's cars, and for a couple of months until I could get everything settled. And then I went to the dealer that summer and I bought Carlos the Contour. He was a 98 Ford Contour. And I was so proud of it because it was my first car that I bought myself. And they put my initials on the side of it with little lightning bolts out of tape. I was very, very excited. And he did not have power windows, much to my dismay. But he did have power locks, which I still can't figure out. That just doesn't make sense to me. Now I know it sounds crazy because everything's power everything in every car. But yes, you used to have to crank windows back in the day. Carlos was great. He was bigger, larger sedan, V6. I could put a lot more stuff in him. And gigging out of Carlos was much easier than trying to gig out of Whitey. But toward the end of, I'd say, the loan, I was probably 6 months away from paying the car off. And I just realized that it was too small. I was going to need another car soon. And that is when my brother drew to my attention, and many friends have seconded that since his speaking it. I may or may not be a car killer. It turns out that I'm really rough on my cars. I expect a lot of my cars. They're workhorses, literally, and I have unusual expectations of my cars. Not only because I'm in them a lot, but I'm always putting stuff in them a lot. And between entertainment, the way it is, equipment, catering, etc., there's always something that is leaking, smashing, getting stuffed into, don't have enough room for, whatever the case may be, all of the equipment. So, and it's a lot of weight in the car, and I'm constantly transporting people, and there's all sorts of weather, so I can possibly be a car killer. Somewhere around the beginning of purchasing Carlos, this was one of those terrible things when you know you're an adult when you have to get car insurance, FYI, which I always did. Clearly learned that lesson from the person in front of me that got smashed. But I had just gone with the company that my parents went with. Didn't think anything of it. Wrote them the first check. Got my coverage. And, I'm 22. What do I know? So it was fine. Until about 3 months later, I get a letter in the mail saying, yeah, you're not really the kind of person that we want to cover. And at that time, I didn't have anything on my record or anything, so I didn't understand what the problem was. They basically just thought I was too young, too new of a driver, and my parents were older and had been with them for years, so they can just opt to drop you, which I found out the hard way via a nasty letter. Pennsylvania law, such as it is, you have a lot harder time, please learn from this if you're having vehicular trauma, if you're not covered for at least 6 months by a company, whatever the company may be, when you start driving and being covered by that company and you get dropped for whatever reason, even if it's not your fault and they choose to get rid of you, it is much more expensive and much more difficult to get into another insurance policy. They can charge you pretty much whatever they want, double, triple, whatever, because you're considered an automatic risk. So I learned this the hard way. And it's funny, I still am loyal to this one guy. His family's great. I met him. I was stressed. I was in peril. I just started calling every place. They wanted like $700 or $800 a month for insurance, which is insane. And I finally called after 20 phone calls to different places. And I got this guy, and I said, listen, here's the sitch. I don't like what's going on. It's unbelievable. I'm a young teacher. $700 a month just in car insurance is more than I'm paying for the car. This is crazy. And obviously things were a lot cheaper at that time. So he said, no, let me see what I could do. So he actually took the time to research the situation, believed me, checked it out, and got me decent and normal car insurance. And I've been with him ever since, proving that loyalty is definitely something that I believe in. And although I do not work for them or anything, I can tell you that Nationwide is on your side. I do like them. I have been with them ever since. That just happened to be the carrier he works for. Obviously, it's personal for me. The family is great that owns that company, his division of it, his agency. But I've never had, knock wood, a bad experience with Nationwide. I can't say enough good about them. So that is definitely quality that I could endorse. Just like, because that happened, 3 months without Carlos, even though I just bought him, would accompany the insurance crisis. I had to put my plate in with the state to prove that that vehicle was not moving for 3 months because I didn't have the coverage to go with it. And rather than drive illegally, I had a pretty much brand new car that I couldn't really operate. So in pure dire straits, what's that expression? Necessity is the mother of invention. My crazy hippie friend, who I still know and love, had a dad who was a mechanic, and he used to have different tinker cars in his house. And she had an old 88 Mazda 626. But her older car was, at the time, the top of the line in that year. And she didn't need it anymore. She drives this old VW van, still has it, still runs by some miracle. I think it's like an 83. She drove cross country to get it. And she said, well, I could sell you that car, no problem. And thank God she did, because she got me out of that pickle. And I affectionately called that one the Hoopty Mobile, because that's exactly what it was. It was a ghetto fabulous, totally crazy. I would never buy this or drive this car. Not so much because it was a Mazda 626, because my friend, being my friend, had put the dancing bears from the Grateful Dead, not really my scene, pictures all over it, and stickers and little peace, love, happiness stickers. It would just never be something that I'd put on a vehicle, and little flowers and flower power stuff. And like I said, she's very hippie, and that's not me. So it was funny to watch. And that the really interesting thing about that car is, for all the features and things that I'll say foreign cars had, because I typically am a Ford person because my brother worked for Ford. So I grew up with Ford Lincoln Mercury, never really drove anything but Ford Lincoln Mercurys. I'm in this Mazda, and I'd never driven one before. And I look, and it had oscillating fans built into the air conditioning heating system, which was the coolest thing, because it was like back and forth all the time. You could turn that on. It was like a cool feature. I've never seen that before or since, but before there were butt warmers and butt chillers, oh yes, there were oscillating fans. So the Hoopty Mobile got me through. I finally got Carlos back, and toward the end of Carlos's loan, I thought, yeah, I need more space. So I leased. It was the biggest mistake of my life, but I leased, and I graduated to an 04 Jeep Grand Cherokee Laredo that I affectionately called Luigi. I kind of like alliteration, in case you haven't caught on yet, so Luigi Laredo. And that was the biggest vehicle I'd ever owned, so it was finally a little bit of breathe room to be able to put all of the equipment into it, and people. What a concept. And it was a cool car. I had a 4-year lease, which is super weird, because normally you get 3-year leases. And I learned the hard way, toward the end of that lease, that they can get you for 10 cents a mile on overages. So I had like $1,000 extra in mileage just from going over so badly. But I was fortunate that, again, my brother knew somebody who knew somebody, and I was able to not have to incur that cost when it came time for the next one. And although I would be with that car for a while, my business grew, and I needed more space and large space, and I didn't want to worry about messing up a car or making anything bad with the interior, because I wasn't really going to buy leather or get any kind of top-of-the-line thing, knowing what I was transporting. So typically I had cloth. And my brother used to have an old Bronco. He had a 78 Ford Bronco, and took me to see Jaws in it. Loved it. And I saw an 88 Ford Bronco that was on the side of the road. I passed it every day. It was a mechanic, gearhead kind of guy that owned it and wanted to sell it. So I called the number on a whim. And it was the best $400 I ever spent in my life. It was a beast. The guy knew what he was doing. It just needed a couple of things that my buddies were able to do. And he should have been the Eddie Bauer edition, but it was not. It looked like those colors, but it was like the faux Eddie Bauer edition. It just wasn't that the limited. So I affectionately called him Ernie Bauer because he was obviously a fake. And my sister would later go on to call him the Green Bean because it did look like a gigantic lima bean or string bean driving down the road. It was like a hunter green with a cream-colored top, like a tan. And you could take the roof off and have like a quasi-convertible. It was a hard top. Problem is, everything was so rusted on this vehicle, which I had bought as an ancillary vehicle anyway. I was so enamored with the back window that you could put the key in and it went down, which only worked for like another 6 months, I might add. It was so rusted. If I had taken the top off, I would have never been able to get it back on. It was rusted to the point where you're supposed to not legally have more than the size of a dime rust in any spot on your car. Well, my father actually made makeshift covers on the sides of the car. It was so bad in the wheel wells that he put drywall mud on them and actually spackled and taped the side of the wheel wells and eventually put metal plates over top of them because it was so incredibly disgustingly rusted. It was like a Ford Flintstone vehicle. There was a hole in the bottom of the car. You could see the road while you were driving. Everything was rusted. It was a rust bucket. It was a great car, had a big engine, and ironically, the guy was a gearhead, so he was able to put a CD player in it. So it was this old piece of junk that still had a CD player, which was a commodity at that time in a vehicle. And for an extra vehicle, the Green Bean lived for quite a while. I had Ernie for, I'd say, a good 3 or 4 years before he totally died. And I did actually even fix that transmission. It was worth it because I could put anything in him and it didn't matter what happened because there was not going to be any repercussions of any kind of leaks or oil or spillage because who cared? It was already kind of all messed up. But he had a lot of personality, a lot of character. And eventually, Ernie passed away from just life support, fell short. And it was time to turn Luigi back in. And I pulled Luigi up to the parking spot to return it. And my buddy got me into an '07 Ford Explorer that I would call Enrique. And when he pulled Enrique around the lot, he pulled in the space next to Luigi. And they were both black vehicles, SUVs. And I remember thinking, standing next to them, looking at David and Goliath, I thought, wow, this car is so much bigger than the one I had. So much room for activities. This is great. I can put more stuff in there. And I had the Explorer for another 3 years. And again, didn't learn my lesson on leasing. Should have. Didn't quite. But whatever miles, don't worry. Luckily, my buddy took care of that too. And he had tons and tons of possibilities until eventually the Trans just died about 3.5 years into a 4 or 5 year loan. And again, I'm a car killer. All right, I own it. Fine. It is what it is. At least I love my cars. I love them to death, but I love my cars. And I couldn't see spending the money to repair everything. I had a full warranty, so they would repair the Trans. But the problem is, and I believe this, so again, if you're a car person, maybe you understand this. I just think that once you repair a transmission, that car is never right again. It just doesn't have the same get up and go. It's prone to more problems. You just don't know. At least in my experiences, believe me, I've killed a lot of Trans. And I just think the transmissions aren't quite right again. So rather than deal with that, I did what I could until it was time for the actual return. And then I started seriously shopping. And I had the scariest experience that I believe I ever had. In the interim, when it was 2010 is when I went and bought 2 vehicles. And the only reason I did that was because my brother had passed. And it was the scariest experience I had in my life. he wasn't there to walk me through it for the first time. He always took care of that. It was just, he was in the business, and he would call whatever guy and be like, yeah, you're doing this. It's for my sister. Sign the paper. Shut up. And it was great. So I didn't have any of that haggling and icky. And he wasn't afraid to walk away. I will say that about him in his life. He was never afraid to walk away. He always had courage and did the thing. If somebody bothered him at work, he'd be like, you know what? See ya, I quit. If somebody gave him any grief about it, he'd be like, all right, you don't need the deal. I don't need to talk to you. You know, he could just do that. And wasn't really worried too much about social graces, but probably got farther in his life without stress. So unfortunately, he passed in late 2009 in December. And I was finding myself that spring close to return time, and I thought, I don't want to pay for this lease and get this car. I don't want to buy it. It's got a problem. So I called up this guy that I had established a relationship with through my mechanic, and he was great. It's nice to do business with, and he said, come on in, and we'll see what we could do. I said, well, look, I really want an Excursion. And he said, honey, you're out of luck. Excursion stopped being made in 2003. And that was the largest product that Ford ever made. I was very sad because they had barn doors and I could put even more stuff in that car. So he said, there's an Expedition. And I said, wow, there's something bigger than the Explorer? He said, yeah. So I bought an '06 Ford Expedition that I had help with naming, and my crew felt the need to name him Elton. Yes, we are DJs, so it went with it, but still. Elton was an '06 lease return, and he only had about 30,000 miles. And I bought him, so no more leasing, and I figured that if I did anything to him in terms of messing him up or getting him dirty, it would be okay because he was already a used vehicle and I wasn't getting a new one off the lot. But I also purchased a brand new 2010 Ford Mustang convertible that I named Mario. And he is my baby. So Mario Mustang was the play car and got to go around in nice weather. And Elton was the work car. And I got them together. And the guy cut me a great deal because I bought both of them. And they have been... Well, Mario is still with me. Elton... Again, he got used and abused badly, but to the tune of almost 200,000 miles. So he went cross country with me to Florida multiple times, and so many stories in that car. Except I really feel bad for the wing juice that did somehow leak all over the back of him. But you live, you learn. Again, always transporting food, and that led me to in 2015, which Elton lived for a long time, and I did get that extended warranty, which I highly recommend. I went to bring him in, and there was no Expeditions on the lot. I went back to the same guy, have been ever since, and I said, what am I going to do? And he said, yeah, they're just really popular right now. And I said, well, I need a truck. So his buddy had a kid that went to Dartmouth College and wanted, I guess their colors are green and white, I don't know, but he wanted his car. The mom and dad were very proud, so they wanted the car decked out with green pinstripes. And my friend came back to me and he said, listen, how do you feel about a Lincoln Navigator? I said, that's a lot more money solution to a simpler problem. And he said, yeah, but just come take a look at the lot. Well, here comes this 15 Lincoln Navigator, all prettied up and leather and everything that I'm not, because I'm a disaster, again, car killer. And it looks like practically a limousine with the little flipping outside running boards and all sorts of butt warmers and whatnot, and every little trick you could have. And it was probably the first car that had the sync system in it that I've used, and still had a CD player, but also had all the little toys that you could plug in MP3s and tons of chargers, and everything was automatic, and a moonroof and this and that, and I probably could wash clothes and do my taxes. And he said, well, I can sell you this car because it was a lease return if you don't mind the green. I said, what green? Because there's a big white car. There were the tiniest little pinstripes on each side in like a Kelly green. Do I care? Not even a little bit. I said, didn't even notice. My last car had pinstripes. Didn't even notice. Let's go. So I now have Norton, the Navigator, and he has been navigating with me since. I would say that that was one of the biggest wins that I was able to do. I do feel guilty about Norton, though, because it's definitely more car and truck than I need in terms of being nice, and I do try and keep him as pristine as I can, but no guarantees. So my crew was nice enough to buy me a WeatherTech to put in the back of the truck to protect it as much as I can, because I didn't want to hurt the car. Again, I don't work for them in any way, shape, or form, but totally recommend WeatherTech. Definitely a quality product. And if you want to save your vehicles, it's the way to go. I would say some honorable mentions that have come and gone throughout my life were an '04 Hyundai Santa Fe that had no back wiper. And that was one of my previous employees' cars that went around town quite a bit. He had about 3 accidents in it. That thing got rebuilt, repacked, repainted, and murdered multiple times. And it stayed, I'll say, in the family because I got it off of him for another one of my guys who literally ran it into the ground. And then still, it was such a popular car, which I didn't know, that I ended up selling it to the junk guy that I know because he wanted the parts on it so badly. And I briefly had an '05 Subaru Forester, which I never really got to know too much. The Hyundai was Hank the Hyundai. And the Forester was only with me about a year because he met an untimely demise as well, in every sense of the word. Not only was he replacing an essentially murdered vehicle, that this time I didn't do it. It had a lot of help along the way, but it was from a junkyard, and it was repacked and refinished as best as it could be. And we called him Subaru Sal, but very innocently parked one day, he was smashed from behind, and it was such a smash, and an off-kiltered catty corner kind of smash, that it messed up the wheel well and essentially bent the frame. So it was not worth fixing poor Sal. So we called up the car gods of junkyardness and got rid of him, R.I.P. And then I just have to bring this up. My brother-in-law was a police officer, and he had this Ford Expedition. It was an '02 Ford Expedition. No, he didn't. It was an Explorer. Sorry. He had an '02 Ford Explorer. And it was that hideous gold color. It was, I don't know. It's a cross between gold and vomit. It's kind of hideous. It's like bronze, but not. And he purchased it secondhand. So it was a second vehicle for him. He was the second owner of that car. And, he was a cop. So he had a police vehicle all the time, but that was like his private vehicle. So it didn't drive much because he was always in the cop car. But that was how I think it still had very few miles, despite it being second owner. And the back of it had that notorious crack down the middle. For some reason, all Explorers in that year and time frame would crack vertically underneath the hatch for some reason, right underneath the windshield wiper in the back. And it wasn't a very terribly used car. It just looked it from that vomit color. And he had like zebra covers on it that his daughter bought, and it was this whole thing. So unfortunately, my brother-in-law passed away, and my sister really couldn't part with the car. And as luck would have it, my other sister was coming off of lease return, and she was perfect and always was for leasing because she barely drives. So where I'm too many miles, her cars were always immediately scarfed up and coveted because she had so few miles. And to keep it in the family, my one sister said to the other, well, look, why don't you drive it since you need a car anyway? So we affectionately and lovingly call him the POS because, well, that's what he is. You can figure that acronym out yourself, but he is lovable, and he is still running by some miracle. And I don't think he's anywhere near 100,000 miles. I think he's only got like 80-some. The joke has been, how long will this car run? Because he's a little rust bucket too, nowhere near as bad as my green bean. But he's had some repairs, not going to lie. But he keeps on keeping on. So she kept saying, well, it'll last a year or two, and I don't drive much, so then I'll get another car. Well, that's been said now for almost 10 years. So it's still going, and the big joke is if and when that car ever goes, then she'll go get another car. So that remains to be seen. But it's still running, so impressive. Anyhow, that's my brief history of cars because love your cars. Give them names. Be nice to them. Talk to them. have a personality for them, especially if you're in them a lot. But some inanimate objects are definitely worth treating like as if they were a pet in some way. Because if you're with them that much, I do think that there's something to, some psychics say that there's like aura transfer or people's personality transfer onto certain things that they own. And it does make sense if you think about it. Like, for example, a musician, if they have a certain guitar or a certain trumpet or whatever the thing is, if they played well and often, you're with that thing a lot. So it's very possible. Favorite computer when writing, favorite pair of dance shoes if you're a ballerina, fill in the blank, whatever it is that you're good at or like to do. It's just very possible that thing is also connecting you to be able to do whatever hobby or accomplish whatever thing you're trying to do. So that's my 2 cents. If you liked what you heard today, then check out eclecticcollectionpodcast.com or listen to us on your preferred platform. I'm Terry Tenaglia. Thanks for listening.